it's Jess. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to today's video. Today we're gonna talk about some books that I have read recently. However, there's a little asterisk on the recently because I haven't done a wrap-up since I did my November wrap up. So I currently have way too many books to talk about. All the books that I read in December and January, and now we're over halfway through February, so there's a lot. I am actually not going to talk about all of them in this video. You're welcome. Today I'm just going to talk about the books that I read in December and then some of the books that I read in January. To get started, I need to talk about the books that I read on my Kindle because if I save them for the end, I will forget about them. I did read a lot of books on my Kindle. I read 9, 5 in December and 4 in January. However, they are 2 series, so I can kind of lump all of them into the series to talk about. First things first, I read the first 5 books of the Ironside Academy by Jane Washington. This is a series that I found out about on Instagram, and I was really intrigued because it was pitched as like kind of a reality show type of book where it's a competition for these college kids, and they kind of said that it was like a little bit like if America's Got Talent combined with Survivor but set at like a really posh boarding school. And I don't know, I was just really intrigued by that premise. At the time, I was not doing well. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I'm doing a lot better now, but I'm still not doing great. But in December, I was particularly not doing well, and I just needed some escapism and some entertainment, and I was intrigued by the tropes of this series, so since it was all available on Kindle Unlimited, I decided to pick it up. Now, before we get into this series, I did want to just mention, because I feel like I have to, that this is an Omegaverse series. Here's the thing, I am not really into the Omegaverse, like as in I have not consumed a lot of content about that. So I want you to take everything I say regarding specifically the Omegaverse with a grain of salt, because I don't know what I'm talking about. But this is an Omegaverse series. Now, to my knowledge, this is like very light on the Omegaverse. The reason that I say that it is Omegaverse is because in this world we have regular humans and then we have this population called the Gifted. And the Gifted is broken down into these like 5 categories: Alpha, Beta, Delta, Omega, and then Sigma all the way at the bottom. And I think normally in the Omegaverse it's just Alpha, Beta, Omega. But again, I could be super wrong about that, so like don't quote me on that. In this world, amongst the gifted populations, like the higher you are up on that, like the alphas and the betas, they are physically bigger, stronger, faster, and all of that. And then like the sigmas are physically the smallest and weakest. Other than like the breakdown in these classifications, it really only seems like there's tiny little bits of Omegaverse sprinkled like throughout the rest of the series. It's like very small. I actually really enjoyed this series. I mean, obviously I read the first 5 books in it, and I will be reading the 6th book when it comes out. It should come out later this year. In this series, you follow the main character. Her name is Isabel, and she is a Sigma, and she is going to be attending this academy called Ironside Academy. Now, what I do find that's weird is that when Isabel moves into the academy, she is 16. However, within the first book, there is like a 2-year time jump after like the first couple of chapters, and then she's 18, and it is an adult series. So like, I'm just not really sure why she moved into the, everyone, like their first years are all 16, so like it's not like she's special. Everyone moves in at 16. But to be perfectly honest, I'm not sure why the author decided to make everyone move in at 16. I think genuinely she just should have picked 18 and like then skipped the weird 2-year time jump. In this world, you have like the humans living in the cities, and then all of the gifted are existing in these like isolated encampments made specifically for them. It does sort of feel a little bit like the districts within the Hunger Games. This is also a dystopian world, so in between the human cities and these like encampments of gifted communities, it's just like desolate wasteland. It's pretty hard to move around the country. We are in the remnants of the United States for the majority of this series. And when you're living in these gifted communities, it is very, very controlled, very surveillanced. It definitely does give Hunger Game vibes. And actually, one of the things that I really enjoyed about this series is that the further we get into it, the more and more commentary we actually get that is kind of similar to the Hunger Games. Now, I do want to say the Hunger Games is a lot more nuanced, and I do think the Hunger Games provides some better commentary. This series, while it does have that commentary, I think the primary objective of this series is entertainment and romance, and it knocks the entertainment out of the park. The entertainment is like a 12 out of 10. I was flipping the pages so fast. I could not put this series down, and it is kind of like reality television. So like I said, the vast majority of the gifted community, like 99.9% of the gifted community, live in these encampments. However, if you attend Ironside, every class that graduates has one winner, and that winner then becomes what's called an icon, and they're basically super famous because they've already built like years and years of fame by being on this reality TV show, because at Ironside Academy you're filmed 24/7. And so then once you graduate as an icon, a lot of them become like actors, musicians, some type of celebrity. And it's also easy for them to become these celebrities because in order to get into Ironside, you have to have some type of gift. It is again the gifted community, or you have to have some type of skill. Like all of the students at this academy are singers, musicians, dancers, or athletes. Every single student at the academy excels in some type of skill that is marketable to turn you into a celebrity. That is part of what gets you into the academy. And the main character, Isabel, she is a Sigma, so she is physically the smallest and weakest, but she is gifted at dance, which is why like all of the titles in the series are like a dance term. What makes it interesting though is her father is an alpha, and he was an icon. He went to this same school and he graduated and won the competition. So she is kind of a bit of a disappointment to him because he wanted to have an alpha child, not a sigma child, but like it's just like random genetic chance. The gifted population does look like a bell curve, with alphas and sigmas being like the lowest percentage of that population. Isabel has spent her entire life before she went to this academy living in luxury and wealth. However, her father is very abusive, and I want to put like a massive content warning for parental abuse on this series. Honestly, I think that before you read this, you should look up a whole bunch of trigger warnings. Like I said, that there is some like Hunger Games type of commentary in there. When you get further into the series and you start learning more about these gifted populations that are isolated, living in poverty, there's definitely a lot of content warnings as we learn about the world. But I do think that the biggest content warning is that one for parental abuse for Isabel, because she is our like primary POV character. But it is interesting that even though she is like considered the least powerful, that she comes from a very powerful family, a very wealthy family, it kind of gets turned on its head once she gets to the academy. Her father was extremely controlling, and so once she gets to the academy, she no longer has access to like the wealth or the privilege that she used to, but she also finally has a little bit of her own freedom because she is a Sigma and she is considered like so low on like the social scale. She basically gets to like fly under the radar of the reality TV show part of it, and like the cameras basically never film film her. So she's finally getting to kind of come out of her shell, potentially make friends, and figure out like what else does she enjoy in life other than dance. The flip side of that is Isabel has 10 love interests. I do love a why choose romance, and that is one of the reasons I picked up this series. However, I did not realize that it was going to be 10. In real life, go for it. Have 10 partners. However, in a book, in my opinion, that's too many. And not because it's like too many partners for a person to have, but simply because there are 10 love interests for Isabel. They do become a little bit more flat than Isabel's character and her character development. Isabel goes through a really, in my opinion, satisfying character development, and in book 5, we're still not completely done with that. Some of the love interests are also going through character development to different degrees, but the problem is when you're trying to write 10 distinct love interests, that's a lot of characters. A couple of them do end up being very similar to each other, and a couple of them end up being kind of flat. In my opinion, I do think that if she wanted it to be like a crazy amount, I think she should have cut it down to like 7 or 8, absorbing some of the characteristics of those 3 characters that were cut into other characters would have made them feel more dynamic, and it also would have given more potential for the love interest character development. All of Isabel's love interests are alphas. 2 of them are sort of teachers at the school. The thing is, this is like a performing arts school, so neither of those teachers actually teach Isabel until we reach a certain point in the story. There isn't really like a conflict of interest in them being teachers, even though like at the same time there is, like they do have that power imbalance. I think honestly the power imbalance was mainly put in to give like this like forbidden love trope a try. I do think that it is handled relatively well, and before the grand soulmate reveal happens, Isabel really doesn't have any contact with these 2 teachers. I don't necessarily love the power imbalance, even though I know it's put in there as a trope. I do think that it is handled in an acceptable way. I talked about like Isabel and her background. It is like the exact opposite for these alpha characters. So we have these 10 male alpha characters, and they have all spent their lives living out on these very heavily policed gifted communities. The gifted communities are like very heavily policed and regulated. However, once these 10 alpha characters move onto the campus, where Isabel felt a sense of relief because she was no longer being so controlled, these alpha characters are considered like the top of the top. Because alphas and sigmas are so rare within the gifted community, there hadn't been any of them in the school. So now obviously, because these alphas come in, they are like on camera 24/7. While Isabel is experiencing freedom for the first time in her life, they are experiencing being televised 24/7. And while Isabel came from a background of wealth and privilege, but a heavily abusive father, the alpha characters came from a background of poverty and sketchy shit, but also for the most part, loving support systems there to help them. I mean, they do all have trauma. Like every single main character in this book has trauma, but they at the same time did have loving people to help them along the way, whether it was like parents or siblings or like somebody from the community that was taking care of them. It's just a really interesting, super entertaining series to watch these 11 characters all interact. They all have different abilities. Oh, that's the other thing. I literally forgot to mention this. So they are the gifted community because they have gifts. Alphas have enhanced 5 senses. Every single alpha has enhanced 5 senses. But on top of that, the vast majority of alphas also have like a superpower. It is very common for alphas and betas to have a superpower. It is less common for like the deltas and the omegas. And then every single sigma has the same power. The sigma's power is that of empathy. Isabel can read all of the emotions around her, but she can also like siphon emotions off of people. Honestly, some of the powers are pretty fun. One character can like turn invisible, one character can predict the future. It's really good fun. Like I said, this series is so entertaining, and I do like that the further we get into the series, the more commentary there is about exploitation, capitalism, wealth, privilege, powers that people have over other people in general, including the superpowers. I really enjoyed this series. I rated the majority of it 3 stars, but the most recent book, book 5, I gave 4 stars, and I'm hoping that the series will continue to improve. I'm hoping that as we go, we get even more commentary, even more challenges to the power structures that exist within this world. If you're looking for something that is going to absolutely entertain the crap out of you, I definitely recommend this series. Moving on to the next 4 books that I read on my Kindle. I read the entire Seraph Black series, also by Jane Washington. This is either like her first or second series, I can't remember. The Seraph Black series actually has a lot of similarities to the Ironside Academy. It is also considered YA, which I did not know, and I would not have read it if I did know that it was YA. In this world, there's so many similarities. First of all, we have again like gifted humans. In this world, if you are born one of these gifted humans, you are either like the center or you are part of a pair. The humans that have these superpowers, they can't really like exist. Like the power is too much and it will like basically destroy their body. And so they have this bond with a pair, and the pair helps to stabilize that superpower that they have so that they don't die. Now, Seraph Black, I hate that the main character's name is Seraph Black. I hate it so much. She is extra super special. She has to be with a name like that. She actually has 2 superpowers, and as a result, she has 2 pairs. So she has 4 love interests. I don't like that the 2 pairs are brothers. So like it's 2 sets of brothers, and I really hate that. I kind of just have to like accept it and move on when I was reading the series. Basically, I just like pretended that they weren't actually really brothers, but they are, and it does feel icky sometimes. The other thing that I didn't like is, like I mentioned, this was a young adult, and once again, the older pair, which again is brothers, one of them is Seraph's teacher at her high school. And I do want to make it clear, absolutely nothing romantic happens until she has already graduated high school and she is like attending college. But I still don't like it. I still don't like it mainly because I'm okay with like the power imbalance trope and like the forbidden love trope existing within adult series, because like we assume that the reader is adult. I really don't like any romantic relationships in young adult that is between a 16-year-old and her teacher. Even if nothing happens between the 2 of them, the author makes it very clear. Jane Washington says like every 5 pages that the 2 of them don't even feel a romantic connection at all, that it feels purely platonic, but I still don't like it. If you're interested in the Ironside Academy, I do recommend it. However, I don't really recommend the Seraph Black series. The plot of the series is like moderately interesting, like interesting enough that you keep reading, but not as good as the Ironside Academy. Seraph has been living with her brother and her stepfather, and once again, trigger warnings for parental abuse, but way worse. I genuinely think Jane Washington learned so much from writing this series, and I do think that the Ironside Academy series would not exist if the Seraph Black series didn't, because there are just so many similarities between them, but I don't like a lot of things in the Seraph Black series. Anyways, she's living with her stepfather, and she actually doesn't know that she has superpowers, but the pairs that she has, the way you know if someone is like your pair, you have like birthmarks on your body. And so the 2 pairs of twins know that they are a pair. These 4 brothers, these 2 sets of twins, are trying to find like who their central person is, and eventually they stumble across Seraph, and then once they stumble across her, she starts getting these like cryptic notes from what looks to be like a stalker. In order to keep her safe, they take her into one of like the communities of like all of these people with superpowers because they think it'll like make her safer or whatever. Basically, she's in hiding trying to find out like who is this stalker, and it gets like dangerous and bloody at times. Like people do die. The stalker is not playing around. The plot is fine, but overall I just don't recommend this series. I just think you should read Ironside. First up, I have Blood of Dragons by Robin Hobb. This is the fourth book in the Rain Wild Chronicles. I can't tell you about this book or this series because it is so deep. This is the fourth series in the realm of the Elderling, and I just don't want to spoil how the other three series go and how they end and what happens. So I will just say that we're following some new characters. There is definitely a lot of world building of like the actual Rain Wild, which we get to see a little bit of in the live ship traders, but we spend a whole lot more time in the Rain Wilds in the Rain Wild Chronicles. I will say that I did really love this series. However, I do think that I rated most of the series 4 stars. I think I only gave 1 5-star out to the whole series. Robin Hobb is still one of my favorite authors. Honestly, no one is doing character work the way she does. She is just an absolute master of character work. But this series did feel a little off compared to her other series. One of the things that makes Robin Hobb's series feel so real and so alive is that you often feel like you are with these characters and you can feel the bigger world. Like you do feel sometimes within her series that what you're experiencing is just one little story. I mean, one big, massive story, one world-changing story, but you do get the feeling that it is just one story within like the grand scheme of the world. But at the same time, while you feel like you are immersed within this world, you do feel that when you reach the end of one of her series that you have a satisfying conclusion to this story within the bigger world. I don't know if anything I just said makes sense, but I think if you've read Robin Hobb, you know what I'm talking about. This is the first time that I read one of her series where I was like, why are you ending there? We don't have enough knowledge for you to be ending there. It's not that the plots didn't wrap up, and it's not that we didn't have character development, because like we definitely did. There's a lot of characters in here that grow and change, and there's a lot of philosophical discussions in here about the group versus the individual and survival and how we build societies and what we value and how we make rules within groups for the greater good. All of that I absolutely loved. I love how philosophical Robin Hobb's books can get underneath the fantasy plot line. And while technically the plot did finish, like the plot wrapped up, I just felt like the story itself wasn't really over. I felt like it was like almost over. I felt like it was like 95% over, but it just was not as satisfying an ending as you normally get. Normally Robin Hobb absolutely nails the endings. And it's not that what happens is what you want to happen. Sometimes what happens in the endings is like the exact opposite of what you want to happen, but the endings feel satisfying and definite and like she nails them. But that was not the case for this one. I know it sounds like I'm coming down on it. This is still a 4-star read. I still love the series. I love the characters in here. Well, some of them. As good as Robin Hobb is at getting you attached to the characters you're supposed to like, she is equally good at making you hate characters that you're supposed to hate. Yeah, there's some people I would love to throat punch in this series. It just definitely was not my favorite of her series. This is currently my least favorite of her series. In my opinion, the first 2 books of this series, I do think it should have been 4 books, but I think that the first 2 books should have been cut and edited down to 1 book, and then we would have had a whole nother book in the series. And I think that if it had been done that way, I think it would have helped with the pacing of the series, and I think more time could have been spent with like the ending of it, and I think it could have perhaps been a bit more more of a satisfying ending. I still love Robin Hobb. I still highly recommend, like, please check her out if you like adult high fantasy, if you like quest stories, if you like adventures, if you like crying. Please, I love her so much. Next up, I read A Christmas Carol. I actually have a vlog where I read this in it. It is my Christmas vlog from last year. I read this. It was a great time. We all know the story of A Christmas Carol, right? We've all consumed that at some point in our lives. And yeah, I gave it 3 stars. I think it is a great, fun time. It had heartwarming moments. It had like slightly creepy moments. It had like really funny and really dramatic moments. One of the things that I really love about reading classics is that like the characters are just so dramatic sometimes. Sometimes they're so over the top in how they behave and what they say that it's just honestly silly and funny. It was also like the perfect Christmas read. I think like it is so Christmassy. Obviously, it's like the original Christmas story. It's very heartfelt and it's a good time. I absolutely recommend reading this around Christmas time. This was my first time reading it, and I will probably read it again in future years around Christmas time. Okay, I only have one more book to talk about today, and it is Blood Tribute by Vella Roth. This is less than 100 pages. It is just a short novella set within the Blood Grace world. Originally, this was published in a larger book of short stories. I did not get the collection. I don't typically buy or read short story collections. However, Blood Grace is my favorite fantasy romance series at the moment. This is a world where we have vampires, and the vampires are very different in this world than they normally are. They are not dark. This is not a dark fantasy romance. Blood Grace series is honestly so sweet and earnest and adorable and warm, and I just love it so much. Within this world, the vampires are called Hesperines. In this book, we follow a Hesperine and a woman. The woman, her parents were killed by Hesperines, and now because she is an orphan, but also because she is a woman, she is set to like disinherit her family home that she has been raised and grown up and spent her entire life in this home. She can inherit the family home because it's also like her parents, her father was like a warrior of the church, so like the family home is meant to like, instead of going to her husband, it's meant to go like back to the church. If she can kill a Hesperine and bring its heart back to the church, then she can actually be made into a holy warrior as well, even though she is a woman. Becoming a holy warrior would make her eligible to inherit her familial home. She actually ends up encountering the brother of the Hesperine who murdered her parents. The Hesperine that murdered her parents was also killed, so she can't like go get revenge on that, like he has already been killed. She still wants to kill his brother. She hates Hesperines because they murdered her parents, and so she comes across his Hesperine. They end up striking a deal because, unbeknownst to her, the Hesperine that murdered her parents, his last wish was that his brother would come save her. So the Hesperine she runs into, he's trying to like save her. He wants to turn her into a vampire, and she wants to kill him so that she can inherit her family home. But Hesperines are much faster, stronger. They have sharper senses, similar to most vampire myths. So she makes a deal in order to like learn more about him, learn about his weaknesses, and also to be able to like physically get close enough to him. She agrees that he can drink her blood for 3 nights in hoping that it will like get her close enough to kill him. Obviously, this is a romance, so you can guess what happens. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I actually cannot believe how attached Vella Roth got me to these characters in less than 100 pages. I bought this because I'm obsessed with the Blood Grace series, but to be perfectly honest, I thought it was just going to be like a generic 3-star read. I thought I was just going to be fine, and it was just going to be something that holds me over until the next main title in this series comes out. I generally don't rate short stories that highly, but I gave this 4 stars and I can't believe it. Like, Vella Roth has grown so much as an author, like from when she started in book 1 of this series, because she got me so attached to these characters. I was giggling and kicking my feet and smiling. This was so much fun. Now, I will say that I actually don't recommend this book unless you have already read at least book 1, preferably like book 1 and 2 of the Blood Grace series, because I think that a lot of my enjoyment from this world comes with the fact that I've read so much that I know the rules of this world. Vela Roth does not do a lot of world building in this tiny, less than 100-page novella. And so I think if you're not familiar with the world, you might miss a lot of smaller details, and I think you might be a little bit confused of how things work. I think you'll still enjoy it and you'll still like the characters, but like I wouldn't recommend it until you are more comfortable within the Blood Grace world. There you go. Those are all of the books that I want to talk about today. That is everything that I read in December plus half of what I read in January. Thank you so much for being here with me today while I rant and yap about these books. Thank you for spending time with me today. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. I hope you stay safe this week. I hope you stay warm, and I'll see you in another video soon. Goodbye.